Welcome to this explainer, where we are going to build your foundational blueprint for navigating the legal and ethical boundaries of open source intelligence. Look, whether you're a cybersecurity pro, a working journalist, or an academic researcher, understanding how to conduct your investigations lawfully and responsibly isn't just a nice-to-have, it is absolutely crucial in today's digital landscape.
Right, let's just dive right into this with a famous quote from the OSINT codebook. And yeah, it sounds a bit like Spider-Man, but it is spot on. The tools we use every single day are incredibly powerful. Wielding them without proper guardrails, well, that can literally destroy your professional credibility overnight. We live in a world where seemingly confidential information can just be found using freely distributed software, but having that kind of power requires immense accountability.
So, to start from first principles, we need to understand what OSINT actually is. Open source intelligence relies strictly on openly accessible data. We're not talking about classified government secrets or hacking proprietary sources here. It's really a structured cycle. We move from collecting raw open source data to processing that into usable information and finally analyzing it to produce actionable intelligence.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with OSINT, law and ethics, move into privacy and informed consent, touch on copyright and public information, look at technical boundaries and scraping, discuss the ethical investigator, and then wrap up with a review and key takeaways.
Okay, Section 1, OSINT, Law and Ethics. Let's see how the foundation of any professional investigation is built on two distinct but equally important pillars.
So, the absolute crucial point you need to understand is this. Just because you can legally access a piece of public data doesn't automatically mean it's ethical for you to use it in your investigation. They are not the same thing. Legal compliance means following the literal letter of the law. Think of regulations like GDPR in Europe. Ethics, on the other hand, that's about your moral responsibility. It's about maintaining objectivity, avoiding deception, and constantly evaluating whether your actions might cause undue harm to individuals or entire communities.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the real-world stakes. When we look at massive, highly publicized failures like the Cambridge Analytica scandal, we see public data that was exploited for psychological profiling without any proper consent. Or think about the Pegasus spyware incident. Publicly available phone numbers were targeted to attack journalists and human rights activists. These examples show us exactly what happens when ethical boundaries are just completely ignored. Mass monitoring fuels massive public anger and completely destroys public trust.
Moving on to Section 2, privacy and informed consent. Now that we understand the stakes, let's explore how we actually protect the people we're investigating.
We have to define privacy as a fundamental human right. It governs personal, organizational, and digital boundaries. A massive part of this is protecting what we call personally identifiable information, or PII, things like names, addresses, or social security numbers. As an investigator, you've got to constantly ask yourself, could the target argue they had a reasonable expectation of privacy here, even if they're posting on a public platform?
Now, this breaks down exactly when you need informed consent based on the type of data you're interacting with. Informed consent basically means the individual knows exactly how their data is being used. So, if you're pulling open government publications, the privacy expectation is super low and consent isn't legally required. But the moment you cross into PII, or snooping in private forum communications, that expectation of privacy skyrockets, and getting explicit consent becomes an absolute necessity. To avoid unnecessary intrusion, and to really respect these privacy boundaries, your investigation must always adhere to the golden rule: data minimization. You should collect only the absolute minimum amount of data strictly necessary to achieve your legitimate investigative purpose. Put simply, if you don't actually need it to prove your case, do not collect it.
Section 3, Copyright and Public Information. Let's transition into thinking about who actually owns the public information we're analyzing.
We really have to draw a hard line here between publicly available information, like public records, news sources, and open census data, and misused information. Accessing public government records? Totally fair game. But listen, just because an image or an article is floating around on the internet does not mean it's free from intellectual property rights. Stealing intellectual property completely violates your professional integrity.
So, when you're handling copyrighted material in your reports, you must meticulously follow fair use principles. Always provide proper attribution to the original creator and really understand the difference between a conditionally licensed Creative Commons asset and something that's entirely in the public domain. Doing this doesn't just make you a good person, it actively protects you and your organization from copyright infringement and some pretty serious legal liability.
All right, Section 4, Technical Boundaries and Scraping. Next up, we're going to look at the technical methods we use to gather this intel and the strict boundaries we must never cross.
In the OSINT world, we frequently use specialized tools to get the job done. For example, researchers often use secure, spoofable cloud browsers to safely investigate the dark web or hostile environments without accidentally exposing their own organization's internal network. But while utilizing these tools is totally standard practice, doing so requires a really strict adherence to technical and legal boundaries. You can't just run wild.
Think of these as your technical rules of engagement. Automated web scraping and crawling, they're incredibly powerful ways to build massive data sets quickly. But if your automated crawler ignores a website's terms of service or overloads their server with excessive requests, effectively launching a denial of service attack, you've crossed a massive line. Bypassing security controls, hacking, or using deceptive practices like impersonating someone else, that turns an intelligence investigation into a literal cybercrime.
We also have to be incredibly careful with metadata. If you don't know, metadata is the hidden data within documents, images, or audio files that details its creation, its history, and sometimes even the exact GPS coordinates of where a photo was taken. Remember that simply downloading and sharing a file might pull hidden metadata that violates someone's privacy rights without you even realizing it. You really must know how to safely scrub and anonymize this data before handing over your intelligence reports.
Which brings us to Section 5, the ethical investigator. Having covered the laws, the data itself, and the technical limits, let's take a second to talk about the human element, you.
Consider this your ethical decision-making framework. It's essentially a step-by-step mental checklist you should run through before initiating any data collection. Number 1, verify you actually have a legitimate purpose for the search. Number 2, ensure the data is truly publicly available without breaching any access controls. Number 3, carefully assess any potential harm your investigation might cause to vulnerable individuals. And finally, number 4, collect only what you need, operating as transparently as humanly possible.
Building real public trust requires that you operate objectively. Unethical behavior allows bias and deception to creep into your workflow, and we don't want that. Professional conduct, on the other hand, relies on absolute integrity. And hey, this also applies to what happens after the investigation wraps up. You must have strict data retention schedules, ensuring the secure disposal and destruction of sensitive data once you're done, so it doesn't suddenly become a massive liability sitting on a server somewhere.
Finally, Section 6, Review and Key Takeaways. Okay, let's wrap up this explainer by cementing the most critical concepts we've covered today.
If you remember absolutely nothing else from today, take away these core principles. OSINT is built on open data, sure, but it demands strict compliance with privacy laws. Always distinguish between what you are legally permitted to do and what is ethically the right thing to do. Practice data minimization, respect intellectual property, and never try to circumvent technical access controls.
And I really cannot stress this enough. Cross-border investigations involve incredibly complex webs of local, state, national, and international jurisdictions. We're talking about tricky concepts like data sovereignty. So when in doubt, never hesitate to bring in qualified legal experts to confirm your legal authority before you start scooping up information. Better safe than sorry, right?
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We've spent this whole time talking extensively about protecting the privacy of your targets, but what about you? If you leave digital footprints while gathering OSINT, how do you protect your own privacy and your own identity during an investigation? Well, this perfectly tees up our next lesson, where we are going to explore operational security, or OSINT, for OSINT investigations. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.